Hey folks, welcome back. Today we're talking about tractors, but we're not talking about my tractor behind me, my DK40. We're talking about 35 horsepower open station hydrostatic transmission tractors. Now, if you don't own a tractor or you're about to buy another one, this might be a good video for you. I'm about to show you a spreadsheet, and in that spreadsheet there's going to be all kinds of specifications from all the major manufacturers to help you make an informed decision when looking to buy a 35 horsepower tractor. Keep in mind, I own a Coyote, but that doesn't mean my spreadsheet's biased. All the information you're about to see here comes straight from each manufacturer, and I hope it helps you guys as you make your way along the pathway to owning a 35 horsepower tractor. Thanks for being here, folks, and let's go have a look. All right, guys, as promised, what you can see in front of you is a spreadsheet that I've compiled from some of the major manufacturers of 35 horsepower compact tractors. Now, this is not an all-inclusive every single manufacturer list. This is just a list of manufacturers that was readily available to me and some of the manufacturers that I considered when I was looking at a tractor to purchase myself. And just so you guys are all aware, if you haven't seen my other videos, I own a 2012 Coyote DK40 SE hydrostatic transmission cab tractor. I tried to take a very unbiased approach here, and so all I'm going to do is provide you the specifications that are found on the manufacturer's websites. Also note that all these numbers shown here are taken to the best of my ability from those manufacturers' website, and I have no affiliation with any of these manufacturers. All information can be found by going to the bottom of this spreadsheet and clicking on the provided links. These are the exact links that I use to get this information and compile this spreadsheet. So, what we're looking at first and foremost along the top is all the manufacturers that I've selected. I'm going to talk about Coyote, John Deere, Kubota, New Holland, Case IH, Massey Ferguson, and Mahindra. The models I'm looking at shown on line 4 here, the CK3510 by Coyote. The John Deere, I selected the 3038E because it offers a hydrostatic transmission, whereas the comparable model, the 3035D, only has shuttle shift. Just to note, I'm purposely selecting all non-cab models and all hydrostatic transmission models because I feel that is probably something that some of you would be most interested in. For the Kubota, I selected the L3901 model, the New Holland, the Workmaster 35, the Case IH, the Farmall 35C, Massey Ferguson 1735E, and the Mahindra 1635. I've color coordinated the the columns, so that you guys can easily see as you scroll down what specs represent what model. First and foremost, we have engine manufacturers, and I've listed them here. I'm not going to go ahead and talk about them. This might be a preference for some of you, some not so much. One thing to take note of, if you see blanks in this spreadsheet, it's because the information was not readily available on that manufacturer's website. It doesn't mean you couldn't dig up the information somewhere, but just to make it clear, I didn't want to make assumptions and I didn't want to go to second-party websites to put information into the spreadsheet. All the information on this spreadsheet is from the manufacturer's website. You guys can look up the blank information here, update this spreadsheet so it's available for you. Engine gross power here, we're talking about 35 horsepower engine horsepower. And so the models I selected all have approximately the same horsepower with the exception of the John Deere, which is slightly higher because the model we're talking about is the 3038E. That's at 37.2 horsepower. But for the most part, if you look at the other manufacturers, we have low values horsepower-wise of the Massey Ferguson, 34.1 horsepower, highs heading on up here, 36.3 in the Kubota, but it's all relative. It's all very close to that 35 horsepower mark. And you can see here the other manufacturers very, very similar, 36.2, 35, 35 New Holland, Coyote 34.9. Rated speed, so how fast the engine is going to spin at optimum speed. You're right around the 25, 26, 2700 RPM mark. Okay, they vary slightly depending on the manufacturer, but it's all pretty similar. Likewise, the number of cylinders on these diesel tractors are all pretty much the same. Kubota, it is likely a 3 horsepower engine, but to be honest, I don't know for sure, so it might actually be 4. Wasn't provided on the manufacturer's website, so it's not listed. Everyone else, 3-cylinder diesel. Where we start to see some first differences is in the aspiration of those diesel engines. Some are naturally aspirated, some have the addition of a turbocharger. The turbocharged engines, the John Deere, New Holland, the Massey Ferguson, naturally aspirated, the Coyote, the Mahindra. As for the Kubota and the Case IH, I'm not sure, wasn't listed. Displacement, I'm not going to go over. You probably aren't as concerned with that as you are with the horsepower rating. Fuel capacity, if we have a look here, fuel capacity, a little bit higher on some models than others. What's of note as for the highest capacity is in the Kubota, 11.1 gallon. Very similarly, the Case IH, 10.5 gallon, and that's US gallons. Lower yet, you're looking at the Coyote at 9 gallons, John Deere 7.5, New Holland similarly 7.4, and the Mahindra 7.7. Fuel capacity, to be honest with you, if you're buying a 35 horsepower tractor, assuming you're not going to be using it commercially, or at least on something, say, like an operating farm, you're probably not going to be as concerned with capacity as if you're going to be using it commercially or all day long. Transmission type, I mentioned earlier on, I chose tractor models that had no cab and were hydrostatic transmission because I think that's going to represent some of the models that you're going to compare when you're shopping for this model or this type of tractor. As we go down here, you're going to occasionally see categories which are highlighted in yellow, like the PTO Power. The reason I highlighted certain categories in yellow is that I think as a tractor buyer, this may be of special importance to you. Much of the specifications of these major manufacturers are going to be similar. However, when you're looking at buying a tractor, you likely need to figure out, is it going to provide the oomph, the power, the horsepower for your PTO implements? If we look at the PTO Power across the board here, the range varies, but it only varies slightly. On the low end, you guys can see Mahindra on the far right has 26 PTO horsepower. On the high end, we start to get to Coyote at 30.8 and Kubota at 30.6. But we're only talking like 1, 2, maybe a little bit more horsepower difference. But sometimes on a 35 horsepower tractor, that means the difference between being able to run your implement or being able to run it poorly, right? So you might need that extra horsepower or two. So pay attention to that as you're shopping. I skipped over a few things here, i.e. the number of travel speeds, the maximum travel speed, so how fast you can go. For me, that's not overly important because I run my tractor off-road. If you're going to be running your tractor, from field to field, then you need to take it down the roadway. Maybe you're going to be concerned how fast it goes. I'm not. Moving down a little bit further, mid PTO speed. Now, from what I saw, with the exception of some of the ones that were left blank, like the Case IH, Massey Ferguson, and Kubota, most of the manufacturers had the option of a mid PTO. If you're going to put a mid PTO implement on your tractor, you probably want to have a mid PTO. So if you're going to be cutting your grass, especially, or if you're going to have a front mounted snowblower, you're going to need your mid PTO. So just make sure it's available on the model tractor you're looking at. Most, from my experience, has it at the 35 horsepower model, but just double check that. Moving down, the brakes and the clutch, all the information's here for you. I'm not going to talk about them in any detail. The information's there. Moving down further, we get into some of the dimensions. If you're going to be trailering your tractor, it's important to take note of what the length is, especially if you're going to be having a loader on your tractor and having a implement on the back of your tractor. Some people try to squeeze their 35 horsepower tractor onto a 16-foot trailer. Sometimes it works, right? And there's you guys can search all over the internet for pictures. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it's real tight. So take note of the length here. And be very cautious because some of the manufacturers' websites, i.e. Kubota, they list the overall length, but they list it without the 3-point hitch on it. That's not very convenient for me because I want to compare apples to apples. The other manufacturers, they're all right around 100 to 123 overall inches in length. Kubota, you probably have to call the manufacturer, just ask them. I'm sure they'd provide you that. Same thing with John Deere. I couldn't get that information on their website, nor could I get it on the Case IH or Massey Ferguson website. Check that out. Call the manufacturer. Call your local dealer. I'm sure they'll have that info for you. As for the width, that's not overly important for me. I don't know when it might be. If maybe you're trying to fit it in between fence posts or something, that might be something of importance to you. For me, I'm in wide open spaces for the most part, so not overly important, but the info is there for you. What I highlighted next was the height from the top of the ROPS, right? You know, the rollover protection bar. So this is an open station, right? So there's no cab. So you have a rollover protection bar. The height to the top of that is important, especially if you're going to be parking your tractor into a garage or even a shop. You need to take note of what the door opening is on your garage to make sure that you don't have to constantly fold down your ROPS in order to drive in. Now, some of these tractors are going to be over the 8-foot high mark, i.e. the Coyote, 99.2 inches. That is slightly higher than the 8-foot mark. And why that's important is that might mean you have to fold down the ROPS. Make sure you don't forget that one. I'm sure there's people out there watching this video who can say, yeah, I forgot once and did a number on my garage door. So take note of the overall height to the top of the ROPS. Some of the models are quite a bit shorter, quite a bit lower. If we look at the lower end, we're looking at New Holland, 87.7 inches. Whereas if we jump up the ladder here, the Coyote is, give or take about 11 or 12 inches higher. One of the other specifications that I found to be very important for me when shopping for a tractor, and it might be important for you as well, is the ground clearance. I'm constantly driving on uneven terrain. I have stumps and logs and things I'm trying to drive over, and so I need to have good ground clearance. The Coyote has 13.4 inches of ground clearance. The John Deere, 14.3 inches. The Kubota, very similarly, at 13.4 inches. Where we start to get a little bit less, and I don't mean a lot less, I mean a little bit less, is down here at the Mahindra. Mahindra, 12.2 inches. So it's still within about an inch and a half or so, or even less. But if you need that inch and a half, you're going to want to pay special attention to the ground clearance. The New Holland, the Case IH, the Massey Ferguson, couldn't find that information online on their website. So give them a call, find it out, make sure it works for you. Tire size, that's listed here. I'm not going to talk about them. They're all there for you. They're crystal clear on websites as well. If that's of importance to you, I'm sure you can switch out the type of tractor tire you want on any of these models. Next thing that's of special importance to me if I'm out shopping for a 35 horsepower tractor is the minimum turning radius. Now, very important to take note that some manufacturers' websites list the minimum turning radius with brakes. Some list without brakes. Why that makes a difference? Well, it just does. So make sure to ask. Make sure you're comparing apples to apples. Minimum turning radius, if you have a look here, the Coyote right at 8 feet. Kubota very similarly, 8.2 feet. Mahindra likewise at 8.5 feet. So very similar. The John Deere, 9.4 feet, but that's without brakes. So does that have an impact on the minimum turning radius? Obviously it does. Okay, so moving on down to the total pump flow. Now we're talking about your hydraulic fluid and the ability for your tractor to pump it. Why you need that is it's going to power a whole bunch of things. Likely it's going to help you power implements, hydraulic implements. So you want to have good total pump flow. Some implements will say you need a minimum pump flow of whatever gallons per minute. Make sure your tractor can provide that. Looking at the values here, so this is on row 30. The high end, the Coyote has a gallon per minute value of 11.7. New Holland has even higher at 13.5. John Deere 9.3, Kubota 6.3, Massey Ferguson 9.7, and the Mahindra quite high as well at 10.8. Is higher better here? Well, it depends who you ask. What I would say is you want to have a total gallon per minute that's high enough to run the implements you plan on using. Moving down here a little bit, what is the category on the 3-point hitches? They tend to be category 1. Case IH didn't list that information. I could likely assume it's category 1, but you guys know the routine. Call the dealer and ask them. The next thing that's important to me, and maybe important to you as highlighted in yellow, is the lift capacity at 24-inch height. This is likely going to dictate what implements you can lift on the back of your tractor, especially if you got something really honking big and heavy that you're going to be lifting up with that 3-point hitch. Looking at the values here, Coyote 1631 pounds, John Deere 1356, Kubota 1433. Okay, and the list continues here. One thing to take note of at the far end here with Mahindra listed a weight of 2,646 pounds. That is likely not the weight to lift capacity at 24 inches. However, I couldn't verify this because the information wasn't available on their website. So when you're looking at the Mahindra, just verify what the actual value is to 24 inches. That way you can compare apples to apples with the other brands. Overall, most brands are right around the same values, right? You guys can see most of them are right around the 14, 15, 1,600 pound range. If you have an implement that falls under that, you have nothing to worry about. You could shop for any of these manufacturers' tractors, but if you have something that is right around that mark, then you need to pay a bit more attention. Weight is another important feature. For me, I want to have a tractor that is as heavy as possible. Weight leads to traction, especially if you're pulling implements, and so I want to have something that really holds me to that ground. Keeping in mind, you can add ballast to your tractor. You can add additional weight, tire weights, or you can add a ballast box or fill your tires. But from the factory, it's nice to have a good hefty tractor, at least in my opinion. Their weights range here, and you can see on the lower end, 2,222 pounds with the John Deere. At the higher end, you start to get into your New Holland and your Case IH. You're over 3,000 pounds. Okay. Some additional things that I mentioned here. Is there the availability of a backhoe? From what I could see, every manufacturer does have that option. Rear remotes, yes, manufacturers tend to have that option. Some have them one as standard. Some have you having to add an option to have rear remotes. Regardless, you can have them on your tractors here. I couldn't find the information on Coyote or Kubota or Mahindra. Simple phone call will get you that detail. Cruise control. Some people will find that important. I don't find it as important to me because I'm not plowing big fields or doing any brush cutting or anything like that with my tractor. But if you are, you might want to find out whether cruise control is an option. John Deere, yes, it's an option. New Holland, it's standard. Case IH, yes, you can get that with that tractor. The other manufacturers, give them a call. Moving on down here, we're going to shift gears into the loader details. Now, the loader tends to go hand in hand with 35 horsepower tractors. A lot of people who are buying the tractors want to have the ability to lift things and do things with the loader. I put down some specs that I dug up from these same manufacturers' websites. I'm not going to talk number to number, but I am going to show you one of the most important numbers that I feel I would be concerned with when looking at loaders. What that is digging depth below grade. My tractor gets used for a lot of things. I use it to grade my driveway, or at least, play around and smooth out my driveway. I use it to dig little holes. I use it to move rocks. I use it to move logs. I want to have the option for my loader to dig below the level of my tires, so the digging depth below grade. Some manufacturers have less depth below grade than others. If we have a look here, at the lower end, Massey Ferguson can dig about 3.5 inches below the bottom of your tires. On the higher end, if you look, the Case IH, almost 8 inches. The Kubota, almost 7 inches. That to me is quite a bit of a difference, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of loader work. Some other important details that I found, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of work with your loader, is what the lift capacity is to the pivot pin height. Having a look here, the Kubota, 1,835 pounds, and that will bring up the load to about 60 inches. The Kubota, 1,130 pounds, that brings it up to the pivot pin at their maximum height. 1,500 pounds with the New Holland. I'm going to skip over IH for now. Massey Ferguson, 1,450 pounds, and the Mahindra, 1,650 pounds. Now, some of the wording on each of the manufacturer's website was a little bit different, hence why I put the exact wording in the column for that manufacturer. If you're looking at this from an overall, you can see Coyote has the highest lift capacity. On the lower end, you guys can see Kubota at 1,130 pounds. Okay, so if you're going to be lifting heavy loads, make sure you verify these stats with the manufacturer when you're shopping for them so that you get what you're looking for. Down at the very bottom, as I noted before, I showed the resources, the websites from each manufacturer that I used. Be sure to check these out. Be forewarned, some of the websites are better at giving information than others. Some, I feel like they're holding their cards pretty close to themselves, forcing you to go into the dealer to look at the tractor themselves. Make sure you check out these websites. Make sure you verify these values. I tried to get the most accurate numbers to the best of my ability posted for you guys, but as always, there's always a chance, and please point it out if there's an error. At the very bottom here, you guys will be able to scroll down. There is some additional information for each of the manufacturers. This additional information I didn't think was 100%, maybe 100% relevant or 100% important for the actual spreadsheet, but nonetheless, I provided it down below. You guys can scroll from left to right to check out some of that information. With that, guys, make sure you ask any questions you might have. But at the end of the day, regardless of which manufacturer you choose, you guys are going to really enjoy your purchase because, to be honest, having a tractor on your property, doing whatever it is you do, is a great help. So happy shopping, ask questions, and take care. See you next time.